Wanting to leave a legacy might be a terrible way to live your life. Did that sound strange? It should. Almost everything around us tells us to become someone unforgettable, to make our mark, build a legacy, and be remembered forever. It's a desire so deeply rooted in us that it feels unquestionably right. What if this desperate drive to be somebody is actually misplaced? The Taoists, among the greatest philosophers in history, argued something radically different. They believed the highest ideal isn't becoming somebody extraordinary. The true path is to be nobody. In this video, we'll explore the principles that will show you exactly how this works. We'll look at the ancient Taoist wisdom behind it, and more importantly, how you can apply it to your life starting today. If you're new here, you can subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and I hope you'll enjoy this video. Here's the story that proves it. In the 4th century BCE, two officials arrived at a riverbank where Zhuangzi, one of history's greatest Taoist thinkers, sat quietly fishing. They came bearing an offer so renowned that it would have elevated anybody to the heights of history. The position of Prime Minister of the entire state of Chu. Wealth, authority, a name that would echo through the dynasties. Zhuangzi didn't even lift his eyes from the line. "I hear there's a sacred turtle kept in Chu," he said, "dead now 3,000 years, wrapped in silk cloth, enshrined in a temple, worshipped as a treasure." He finally turned to face them. "Tell me honestly, would that turtle rather be dead and honored or alive and dragging its tail through the mud?" The officials didn't hesitate. "Alive, of course, dragging its tail through the mud." "Then leave," Zhuangzi said, already turning back to the river. "I'd rather drag my tail through the mud too." He wasn't refusing out of humility. He understood something those officials never once considered, that the temple turtle, wrapped in silk and worshipped by crowds, had traded its actual life for a preserved image of itself. It was recognized, honored, and permanently, irreversibly dead. The Prime Minister's seat was never power. It was a gilded cage with a title engraved above the door. Real authority, Zhuangzi understood, was never about being admired. It was the ability to stay fully, messily, unmistakably alive. Even if that meant remaining unknown, muddy, and absent from history's official record. He wasn't forgotten, of course. That's the irony worth sitting with. The man who refused to chase a legacy is the one people are still quoting 24 centuries later, while the officials who came offering him one have no names left at all. It's worth noticing what Zhuangzi didn't do. He didn't storm off angry and lecture the officials on the emptiness of ambition. He simply turned back to his line, because their offer had never actually threatened him. You can only be tempted by a trade you secretly still want to make, and he did not desire it at all. Most of us are never offered a prime minister's seat, but we're offered smaller versions of it every day. A chance to look impressive instead of staying honest. A chance to be seen instead of being free. So how do we break free from this? 3 principles carry the weight of it. Every craving to be seen is a small transaction. You hand over a piece of your peace in exchange for someone else's approval. The moment you need to be acknowledged, someone else is holding the switch to your calm. And once you need to be known, you stop living and start performing. Every word measured before it leaves your mouth. Every choice filtered through the question of how it will look to whoever's watching. The strange part is, most of the people you're performing for were never watching that closely to begin with. You're rehearsing for an audience that's mostly imagined. Most people make this trade dozens of times a day without ever noticing it. In the pause before a message gets sent, in the sentence quietly rewritten to sound more impressive than it needed to be, in the achievement that only feels real once someone else has confirmed it. The moment you let go of that need, the transaction stops entirely. There's nothing left to buy, because you're no longer trading your peace for anyone's opinion of you. Decisions start coming from your own values instead of a crowd's imagined verdict, and that single shift quietly rewires almost everything downstream of it. Your work, your relationships, the way you spend an ordinary afternoon. This doesn't happen through a single act of willpower. It happens through repetition, noticing the craving as it rises and simply not obeying it again and again until the craving arrives less often because it stopped getting fed. Freedom from need was never a decision made once. It's a practice, the same way patience is a practice, or honesty is. There's a version of this most people already recognize from ordinary life. The friend who doesn't need to win the argument is somehow the one who ends up right more often because they were listening instead of defending. The colleague who doesn't need credit for the idea is usually the one the room trusts with the next one. Freedom from need doesn't just feel better. It tends to work better too. An unknown life carries no expectations to defend and no image to protect. Nobody is waiting to catch you failing because nobody built a story around your success to begin with. That absence of an audience isn't a loss. It's room. Room to admit a mistake without flinching. Room to change direction without narrating the reasons why to anyone. The person with nothing to protect can move through the world the way water moves through a riverbed, taking whatever shape the moment actually requires without needing to defend whatever shape it held a moment before. That flexibility is a form of strength status can never purchase, because status, unlike water, has to be constantly maintained, and maintenance is its own quiet, invisible exhaustion. This is precisely why Laozi returned to water so often as an image, not because it's gentle, but because it never has to argue for its own shape. It fills whatever container it's poured into and moves on without complaint. A life without a fixed image to guard can do the same, adapting without humiliation, changing without collapse. Compare that to the person who's built a reputation for always having the answer. Every question becomes a small test they can't afford to fail in public. Compare it to someone with no reputation to defend at all. They can say, "I don't know," without it costing them anything, because there was never a version of themselves on the line to protect. That freedom to simply not know is worth more than most people realize. Here's the paradox almost nobody expects going in. The less you perform, the more people find themselves drawn toward you. A performance, however polished, carries a faint static that people register even when they can't quite name what's off. Authenticity carries none of that static. People feel the difference before they can put words to it. This is why the wisest figures in these old traditions rarely went looking for students. The students found them instead. Nobody advertised and built a following to maintain. They simply lived without pretense, and that pretense-free life became, entirely on its own, the thing worth seeking out. You don't attract people by convincing them you're impressive. You attract them the moment you stop needing to. Think of the last time you met someone who clearly wasn't managing your impression of them, who said the plain thing instead of the polished thing, who let a silence sit instead of filling it. You likely trusted that person faster than almost anyone else in the room, without being able to say exactly why. That's the mechanism. You don't build that kind of trust by trying harder to be liked. You build it by no longer needing to be. The moment you stop managing how you come across, people finally get to meet the person who was there all along. And that person, it turns out, is who they wanted to meet in the first place. So here's your invitation. Pick one place this week, one conversation, one decision, one moment you'd normally manage carefully for others to see, and let it stay plain instead. Notice the discomfort when it shows up, and notice, underneath that discomfort, the particular relief of setting down a weight you didn't fully realize you'd been carrying. Zhuangzi chose the mud over the temple 24 centuries before you were born, and the choice is still being talked about today, not despite his refusal to become somebody, but entirely because of it. The turtle in the temple has no name anyone remembers. The one dragging its tail through the mud is the reason we're still talking about mud at all. You don't need a title, an audience, or a name people recognize in order to be free. You need only to stop needing any of it. That was always the whole teaching, and it was always simpler than the chase made it look. None of this promises comfort. Letting go of the need to be somebody feels, at first, like standing in a room with the lights suddenly turned up. Exposed, unpracticed, unsure what to do with your hands. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's the sign that something real is finally happening instead of something rehearsed. Give it time, and the discomfort turns into something closer to quiet. Not the quiet of having nothing left to say, but the quiet of no longer needing anyone to hear it in a particular way. That's the freedom Laozi and Zhuangzi were both describing. 24 centuries and one riverbank apart. Somewhere between the temple and the mud is where most people spend their entire lives, not quite committed to the performance, not quite brave enough to set it down. Zhuangzi didn't find that middle ground more comfortable. He realized it wasn't a choice worth making twice, because the middle ground demands just as much energy as freedom, but gives none of the peace. You're still performing, just with less conviction. So let it be the same for us. Let go of the need to be validated by others. Let ourselves be invisible when invisibility serves us. Let ourselves be, simply and plainly, authentic. Not because it's easy, but because on the other side of it waits a peace no amount of recognition could ever deliver. The quiet, unremarkable freedom of a life that is finally, actually your own. Thank you for watching.